And lastly, but not least, how that wheel has helped a guy called Duncan. And this is a real case study, and Duncan is very, very happy for us to use this just to prove the point about how useful emotional intelligence assessments are, scientifically proven assessments, and how they can develop individuals and teams in the workplace in particular. So here is the guru. This is the guy that I follow, Daniel Goleman. And Daniel Goleman says that emotional intelligence is defined as the ability to identify, assess, and control one's own emotions and the emotions of others and that of groups. So notice a real focus here on the terminology of emotions. And he's written a really good book, and it's actually called Emotional Intelligence. I would advocate, please do read that book. It is absolutely superb. So let's move on to the first thing then, this whole thing about the difference between EQ and IQ. But again, there's a little bit of language. You might notice some of the letters here. There's also this thing about EQ and EI. So EI is just the everyday language for emotional intelligence, the E and the I for emotional intelligence. But what's the difference between EQ and IQ? So the EQ is how you, emotional intelligence is actually measured, and it actually means emotional quotient. Some examples of this, oh, sorry, what's going on here? I've just pressed the wrong button here, just 2 seconds. Some examples of this would be, and this is Daniel Goleman's 4 pillars, as he calls them. He used to have 5, and he took empathy out of that about 10 years ago. Goleman talks about emotional quotient of self-awareness. He talks about self-management. He also talks about social awareness. And I'll cover each of these in a bit more depth as we go through this session. And lastly, he talks about relationship management. That's not relationship as in spouse, as in relationship at home. He's talking about relationship in the workplace predominantly, but it can also be taken to the home place as well. So then we've got the IQ side of it. This is the intellectual quotient. Again, we've all heard of this. So the intellectual quotient, that's looking at intellectual ability, analytical ability, logic. How do we apply logic? And then how do we have rational abilities? How do we rationalize things? What thought processes do we use to rationalize things? And these are linked to or concerned with verbal. So how do we speak? You know, languages, spatial awareness. What are we like in terms of reading maps and reading situations, and when we're out and about, geography-wise? When we drive places, we're actually pretty good at making sure we miss things in a vehicle. That's because we've all got some level of spatial awareness, most of us anyway. Visual, what are we seeing? What are we taking in? What are we taking in our peripheral vision as well? All part of your intellectual quotient here. And then lastly, but not leastly, the mathematical skills. So you can have these people that we would classify as really, really clever, very, very high IQ, but they might have absolutely very low emotional intelligence. You may have met people like this who are clever, but don't have a very high emotional intelligence at all. So I'm going to just talk us through the emotional quotient side of things as we go through this session. Interestingly, one last factor, your IQ tends to peak in your late teens. So I think most of us on this call are probably past that. So the bad news is we have peaked with our intellectual quotient, our intellectual capacity. Where we haven't peaked, and I think I know most of the audience here, what the good news is our emotional intelligence, we can improve it all the way through, they say, till about our late 60s. Some may take it even further. So what I can categorically say on this call today is everybody in the audience, myself and Tracy, all of us can improve our emotional intelligence. But it's not about having a high EQ, as I'll explain as we go on. Yes, on the IQ side, it's about having a high IQ. Emotional intelligence for me, yes, it can be high, but the crucial bit for me is it has to be balanced. And I'll talk about a balanced emotional intelligence as we go on. So first thing then, let's get everybody, and I know we've got quite a few, I think we've got quite a number on this call today, but can we, if we can, go to annotate, which you should see, if you've got a laptop, it's easier probably, but you might be able to do it with your phone, and just give me some ideas about how you might improve your self-awareness. So in annotate, let's just see, how might we improve our self-awareness? What kind of things might we be doing? And if you want to use chat, I can see in chat. So if you want to use chat, and Tracy might be able to type some of these things in.
No, I can manage to chat. If you don't know where annotate is, if you go to the top of your screen, there'll be a little thing saying you are viewing Rob's screen. And if you click down on the view options next to that, it'll have a little box saying annotate, and then you can click onto the text box, just like I am doing now. And you can type on there. There you go. So
well done. We've got it.
Oh, we can do also. Oh, we've got a big. You don't have to write. You don't have to write. If you want, you can go into the text and just type the text box, or you can put it into there. That's great.
Good. Well done, Petra. Personality profiling, reflection. Hi from Tracy. Very good. Awareness. Yeah. Introspection. Lovely, Tara. Yeah, 360 feedback, fantastic. What else are we thinking about here in terms of, and I'm trying to read chat while we're here, being self-aware, 360 reflection. So don't worry if you're on your phone, that's fine. We're just getting lots of stuff in here. Breathing, yeah, breathing is always good in terms of our self-awareness. Mindfulness, yeah, Mark, very good. Some good stuff here. Any others? Any other takers on this? I am watching chat at the same time. That's pretty good. I will go and see how many of those match. I'm going to save this actually, Tracy, if I can. Let's see if I can be really clever here and go to annotate, and I'm going to save the screen. I'm going to save it. Now I'm going to clear it. So don't worry, I have saved it. Clear all drawings, and I'm going to move on. If I don't clear the drawings, it stays on the next slide, sadly. Right, so how can we do this then? First thing I was thinking about, and we've had this, feedback. And this whole thing about feedback, asking for feedback, you don't necessarily have to use the word, give me some feedback. How do you think I did? You know, just be mindful of that. Okay, Mark's still going with that. If we could, no need for annotate anymore. Thanks for that, Mark. It's good. Practice is good. Yeah, keep practicing. Actually, yeah, if you want to write, now don't write on there because I'm just thinking I'm going to put some more stuff over there to the right-hand side. But feedback is really, really crucial, and how we do that feedback as well. Then we've got to think about, okay, so we're going to ask for feedback, and who we're going to ask for the feedback from, whether that's family, whether that's friends, whether it's suppliers, whether it's buyers, whether it's your boss, whether it's your boss's boss. Top tip here is, I know it's different for different people across the world, but have a think about, don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Don't be afraid to ask somebody to let you know how you think you did. And two phrases that I love to use for feedback are, what do you think went well? And what do you think I could have done differently? And notice the language that I'm using. I'm not saying what went bad, what didn't go well, just what could I have done differently? And it's how we ask for that feedback. And from the other side of the coin here, it's how we actually give that feedback as well. Another methodology is the good old annual appraisal. And I think I come from a policing background, and sadly in my early days of policing, the first time you got any feedback was just before Christmas. And our appraisals were always done about a week before Christmas from our sergeants. And sadly, they would give you the feedback and they would go off on leave and leave you with this report, and you don't necessarily understand why they've said what they've said. You've had no feedback throughout the year, so the first thing you get is this on the annual appraisal. Not a good way of doing it. And again, I would say perhaps question the emotional intelligence of my bosses who used to do it in this way. Probably not self-aware and certainly not socially aware in terms of doing it this way as well. Another way of doing this would be through questionnaires, through assessments. And I'm going to put a bit of a caveat on this particular one. There are lots of emotional intelligence questionnaires available online for free, which is fantastic. So we go on there, we do 40 questions, we score 38, and we put our thumbs up and we think, fantastic. We are really good. We are really emotionally intelligent. My caveat to it is all of these questionnaires that you will get for free are not in any way, shape or form scientifically proven. And usually it grabs you in and they want your details to do something else in terms of sales or whatever it might be. So my caveat is be very careful with anything that's free in terms of emotional intelligence test. Usually you will score high, very rare that you score low, because they want to suck you in for something else. So it's not scientifically proven in any way, shape or form. So my caveat is be aware of anything that's free in terms of an emotional intelligence questionnaire. Assessments, you can get lots of different psychological assessments, psychometric assessments. That's absolutely fine. They're probably scientifically proven. And then we've got, somebody mentioned, in fact, quite a few of you mentioned this in the previous slide, that 360-degree feedback is really useful as well. Absolutely agree with that. And just some others for me to have a think about is, have a think about paying attention to what others, so what other people are saying and what's bothering you about what they may be saying. So have a think about, what is it that I don't like about what it is that they're saying? What is it that I do like about what it is that they're saying? Another one that somebody put up on the previous slide was this whole thing about meditation. Meditate around your mind, meditate on your mind. And we've all heard of mindfulness. There's lots of really good stuff available now online around mindfulness. I've certainly done 6 sessions of mindfulness last year with a lady, and I kind of poo-pooed the whole thing about mindfulness before having done that. Now I'm a really strong, really big advocate of it. It really does make you think about your mind and your thoughts as well. So certainly one way of having a look at self-reflection is meditate and really take yourself into that space if and where you can. Just conscious, anything on the chat, Tracy, before I do move on? I've noticed quite a few chat things coming in.
No, I'm managing the chat. There was a few people asking, can we recommend a good feedback questionnaire, or sorry, a good emotional intelligence questionnaire? And I said, hang fire, it's coming later in the presentation.
Oh, that's it. I've already teased people into this already. I will recommend a very good questionnaire for you. And it's not the only one that's available, but it's certainly the only scientifically proven one I'm going to recommend to you later on. So how do we implement self-management then? So there's an interesting question. So we become self-aware. We've got lots of feedback. People have been giving us feedback. So we really now know how to be self-aware through lots of different methodologies. What we have to think about is learning some positive self-affirming beliefs about ourselves. Yeah, am I okay? Of course I'm okay. My feedback is telling me that I'm okay. But sometimes we have to have that kind of belief in ourselves as well. You know, believe in what we are good at. Don't always knock yourself down. And I'm conscious that with what's happening with COVID, with potential redundancy, some people are actually questioning self-worth. We are all worth a lot, but sometimes it's hard to try to get that self-affirming belief in there. But it's a really good thing to be doing is have a think about, what am I good at? What am I really, really good at? And we are all good at lots of things. So just bear that in mind. Another thing to do here in this very much quick moving world that we work in terms of the workspace, allow some time for self-reflection. Have a think about, where in the working week do I sit down quietly and actually have a self-reflection period about, what have I achieved this week, today? I used to do it when I used to drive home in the car. Not much of that going on at the moment. And I used to do it on a Friday near the end of the working day. And particularly on a Friday at the end of the working day, because lots of people kind of were working from home on a Friday back then. But have a think about, where can I have this time for self-reflection? And it might be you do it over the weekend. It might be you go for a walk, you might go for a cycle, you might go for a dog walk, but whatever it is, just get yourself probably away from anything digital and anything that's going to kind of break into your self-reflection space, and then have a think about, okay then, how was my week this week? How was my day today? And have a think about the positive things that you have done, the positive things that you have achieved. My next tip in terms of self-management is, think before you act. And what I mean by that is, how many times have we done something, have we said something, and then we go, we think, I wish I hadn't said it that way. I wish I hadn't blurted it out of my mouth and said it in the way that I said it. So I always have this thing about counting to 10. We always think as parents, for those that have children, sometimes rather than scolding our children and getting annoyed by what they do and how they do things, count to 10 slowly. And then that impulse about wanting to do what you'd normally do should die down and go away. And the other one which we have talked about is this whole thing about developing skills for breathing, breathing in through the mouth, out through the nose, and this whole thing about mindfulness. Might take you a few breaths to get to the top of this particular mountain that this lady is on, but wherever you want to do this, just find the space to do it, the peace and the quiet, and have a go at mindfulness. I must admit, I'm a lover of having this mindfulness music on in the background. It does work. It doesn't work for everybody, but it does work for me. And then this whole thing about developing some self-soothing and self-motivation skills. You wake up in the morning, you bounce out of bed and you go and do what you're going to do, and you're just thinking, let's make today a really great day. Be positive. What is going to be great about today? It might be the end of the day, it might be during the day, but develop some kind of self-soothing and self-motivation skills. I find myself talking to myself out loud. Sometimes get questioned by my wife, but that's by the by. But whatever it is and however it is you want to do it, you might do it by putting notes in your phone or whatever you might want to do. But just think about what's going to make today really, really good. And I think for me, the thing that caps all this is making sure that we try and stay physically healthy. And I'm not advocating we all do one-arm press-ups, because I definitely couldn't do that anymore. But whatever it is, whatever that means, whether it's walking, whether it's cycling, canoeing, whatever it might be, but whatever you can do to keep yourself in some good physical shape will all be beneficial.
And Rob, we've got some good things on the chat coming through just on that before we move on. Some people have said that they meditate for 15 minutes a day.
Brilliant.
Other people have said they put little reminders on laptops and little notes everywhere. I like that one. Positive affirmations. I love, don't say the first thing that comes into your mind. I'm terrible for that, as you know, Rob. So I really have to work on that. Self-management is mostly about discipline and habits. And that is right. Self-management is mostly about discipline and habits. So some good things there on the chat I just wanted to share.
Lovely. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. That's really good. Please use chat. Please engage with us, because we're trying to share good practice, whatever we can, with everybody. So using social awareness to manage your teams then. What do we mean by that? What do we mean by social awareness? And this is where Daniel Goleman talks in depth about empathy. This whole thing about understanding another person's emotions, understanding another person's needs and their concerns. You'll only be able to do this if we engage with our teams. We engage with each of our members of teams. Now, this has become a little bit more difficult for those teams that are now working at home. So we have to do something different in terms of our engagement, whether that's a daily check-in or a weekly check-in, non-work related, but think about how do we engage with each of our team members on a regular basis so that we can understand their emotions, their needs and their concerns, especially if your organization is going through any kind of turmoil in terms of, do we go back to work, do we not go back to work in terms of office space, and I am very much mindful of furloughing and all the things that go with that as well. And then we've got, alongside that, we've got this whole thing about organizational awareness. And what I mean by that, so the ability to understand the politics within your organization and how this affects those that are working within the organization. Yeah, how truly aware are we about the whole organization? We may work in a team, we may work in a department, we may work in some specialist role on our own, but have a think about taking the blinkers off within the work and having a look at what is happening organizationally. What's happening when the press, what are the press saying about us and our organization? How fully aware are we of our organization? So making sure that we've got organizational awareness as well. And then Goleman talks about service as well. So what does he mean by service? And what he's talking about here is, how do we meet the needs of our clients and our customers? Do we truly understand what it is they need? And it's not always about money. Some people think it's always about money and we're always trying to give them, you know, the best profit we can, or we get the best profit we can. Actually, sometimes it's nothing to do with profit at all. They just want a good delivery of service, or they just want a long-lasting product that's going to be, you know, the best that there is in the market. So do we truly understand, I know it's linking into the sales side here, but do we truly understand the needs of our clients and our customers? And sometimes I would actually link that to the needs of our suppliers as well. Then we talk about the awareness of social situations. So what we're talking about here is carefully considering what other people want. How are we going to plan to communicate with them in a way that is intended to meet those needs? So again, we talk about email. Is email the best way of doing this? Should we perhaps be thinking about picking up the phone? Should we perhaps be thinking about getting into a vehicle or a train and actually going to meet people face to face? That's where we get the best engagement, when we're actually meeting people face to face. Emails, texts, those kind of things, they can come across as quite impersonal, and lots of what we intended to say can get lost in translation. So be aware of the social situation is what Daniel Goleman says here in terms of managing our teams and having social awareness. It's really about understanding what's the best methodology for communicating with our team, with our people that we need to have engagement with. So using empathy then, this lovely terminology. This is a partial quote, so it's not a quote from Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence. What he's saying here is, if you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, no matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. He also talks about other things within this quote about engagement, communication, and bottom line is you need to have empathy in there, or you're not going to get very far. You need to, some of the phrases we've heard is about walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. So the big thing here is we need to make sure that we really do understand what it's like being in that other person's shoes and walking the miles and miles that they may walk in, and can you really feel it in terms of putting yourself in those shoes with them. Absolutely vital here in terms of this particular piece. And I'm just going to kind of move on to get everybody engaged. So to bear this in mind, this whole thing about empathy. Can we empathize with those that we work with? So here's our next engagement with yourselves. So how could you and how do you use empathy at work? I'll be really interested to see how you come across in terms of using empathy at work. So again, if you can use Annotate, if you can use chat, I'd be really interested. And I'll watch chat as well, Tracy, to see what's coming through here. Please use Annotate for those that have got that and know how to use it. Time to listen. Yes, Simon's mentioned here about having time to listen. Yeah, and again, Tara, brilliant. Yeah, active listening, really good. Yeah, active listening, asking how people are and actually mean it. That's really good. Make sure we mean it when we ask the question. Listening and coaching, personal communication, listening to others. Some really good stuff here. Yeah, I like that. So I think I was talking about here, it takes 30 seconds to pick up a phone and call somebody. Rephrasing, yeah, very good. And summarizing, recapping, definitely. All good stuff coming here now. Understanding the diversity of personality, effective questioning. Yeah, I'm having to move my chat around. There's so much stuff coming in here, which is great. Really good. Yeah, drop-in sessions, really good. Whoever put drop-in sessions in there. Yeah, remember what the people say and concern them. Yeah, don't just ad-libly do it. Make sure that we say we're going to do something about it if we're going to help them. Use open questions. Yeah, fantastic. Who, what, when, where. I don't tend to use why deliberately, and the how question as well. Acknowledge another person's feelings. I'm liking the fact we've got a different color now, which is great. Somebody's really pushing this one through. Yeah, that's good. I haven't seen it on the screen yet or within chat. Taking time to tune in. Well done. Thanks, Petra. Yeah, there's a new phrase I picked up doing some training delivery about 3 months ago, and that was the term empathetic listening. Because somebody's used the phrase a few times about active listening, and empathetic listening just takes it to the next stage. And what they say here is we're listening from the heart, as opposed to listening from the mind kind of thing. So Yeah, ensuring the connection as it's empathy and not sympathy. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, some people do get mixed up between empathy and sympathy, and they're two totally different things. And that whole thing about empathy is about being in their shoes. Yeah, somebody's just saying they love empathetic listening. Yeah, one of the top phrases I've picked up in the last few months. Not something that's mentioned by Daniel Goleman either. Right, really good. Thanks very much for the interaction. So everybody has obviously understands this whole thing about using empathy at work, using empathy with your team as well, and actually using empathy with your clients, your customers, and your suppliers. So that's fantastic. So thanks very much for your engagement on that one. I'm now going to move on. The question has been asked. Okay, then, so what kind of assessment should we be using? Oh, I need to clear the screen. I knew I'd forget to do that. Clear the screen, clear all the drawings. Okay, and I'll just get rid of that as well. Yeah, so this model is used by a Canadian company called MHS, and I was very fortunate to be trained in this 3 years ago. And if you look at the model, it's got 5 what we call key composites. But just before I talk about the model, and this is something quite unique, and this is why I gave you the caveat a few slides ago. This EQI 2.0 model remains the only scientifically validated psychometric assessment tool in the world for accurately measuring an individual's emotional intelligence. So that not only is it scientifically proven, it's the most accurate that there is on the market at the moment. The accuracy of the assessment, it's the accuracy of the assessment which has resulted in it being most popular, most accurate, most trusted assessment of its kind. It is used for individuals and it's also used for teams. That's the great thing about it. Some other top information that links with this is it's used as a recruitment process as well. Not on its own, it can't sit individually, but it can sit alongside other methodologies for recruitment. It recruits highly emotionally intelligent and balanced individuals. Notice the term balanced. It's not just about having a high EQ. It's also about having a balanced EQ. And I'm noticing I'm interchanging EQ and EI. It also identifies talent within your organization with the potential for promotion and to support their growth, especially if you've got maybe a high performance team going on within your organization. It also helps to develop managers and people skills. So it's not necessarily just for high profile, people that are going to go through the organization quickly. It develops all managers and people skills to support any technical competency. How many times have I come across the scientist in places where I used to work who are brilliant at doing nuclear physics, have no idea how to talk to their team? Absolutely no idea, because nobody's actually shown them or educated them in emotional intelligence, but they're very high in IQ. It also helps to improve team and organizational performance, as I mentioned. We put our money where our mouth is, and we actually say it can actually improve the bottom line, because you're getting your team balanced, your individual workers balanced, and they're getting much more development on the emotional intelligence side. So they can engage with customers, clients, potential customers, potential clients, because they know how to do it. Also helps to support leadership development programs with one-to-one coaching. So you don't just do the assessment and think, there's my score, thank you very much. You need to then have the coaching that goes with it to know how to get your score into balance going forward. And the last piece about here is it does, and it's been proven, to improve sales and service delivery, because it goes back to the individual each time about how to improve your emotional intelligence and these 5 composites and then the subscales that sit underneath them. It's actually not written here on the model, but it also gives you a happiness readout. It will actually tell you what your happiness score is once you do the assessment, which I don't know if any other model does that, but this does. I'll talk a little bit more about the model as we go on. So I'm going to talk about the model through a particular case study here. And the case study is all around a guy called Duncan. As I say, this was about 5 years ago this happened to Duncan now, and it is his real first name. I won't ever give you his surname. It happened in the West Midlands here in the UK, where an organisation, it was a manufacturing organisation, had been doing really, really well. Sales went down the pan, and they thought, if we don't bring somebody in pretty soon, we are absolutely going to be lost in terms of an organization. So they did the usual headhunting thing, and I'm sure some of our audience know exactly what I mean by that. You go to agencies and you say to agencies, this is the criteria for somebody that we need to bring in very urgently so that we can improve sales and, you know, literally save the company. So they did all this, and they went with an agency, and the agency gave them the credentials of Duncan, did all the interviewing as you do, and they brought Duncan in. So Duncan came in, he was hired in by HR and the chief executive. So not only did the HR do all the due diligence stuff and all the interview process, they also brought Duncan in front of the chief exec, and Duncan said what a great guy he was and all the sales that he did, and thought, yeah, he is just what we need to turn this company around. So he was seen, excuse me, as a pace setter, and guess what? Duncan really does get stuff done. No hanging about with Duncan. He gets in, really does get the job done, which is brilliant. The good thing for Duncan was he was also on a really good salary, and if he could turn this business around, he was on a 50% bonus. So guess what? He was literally on it, in it, doing it, making decisions left, right, and center, and started to turn the business around, which is obviously why they brought him in. Fantastic. I'm probably listening in the audience, they're thinking, this is great news, absolutely fantastic news. We need some more Duncans. But do you need some more Duncans? This is the big question. Something happened, and coaching was required for Duncan. I think it was about 3 or 4 months in, the business has started turning, we started getting profits in, but there was some coaching support required because, and this is where emotional intelligence comes in now, there were staff in Duncan's team started to call in sick. They'd never ever called in sick before. So it wasn't just one staff member, which you could probably think, okay, that's just that this happens. More staff were calling in sick. Now we've got thinking, oh, there's something not going quite right here. Why are we getting so many people calling in sick in Duncan's team? So then 2 people resigned after 2 months of Duncan being in post. Now just have a think about that. 2 people resign. How much money is it going to cost the organization to refill both of those posts? Maybe not as much as it was to get Duncan into post, but we've now lost 2 people. What if one or both of those 2 people took the organization to an employment tribunal because of how they were treated by Duncan? Again, we never think of these add-on costs, but it does cost the organization money. It might be reputational damage to the organization if either of these 2 people go public on the reason for why they've resigned. So just have some thoughts here about knock-on effects. This was all about a successful guy that got things done. So something's not working properly here. What they found out when they did the analysis through the assessment is Duncan was focused on the job, absolutely focused on the job. And he was, for instance, really, really high on his score of empathy. And I'll share some of his scores with you in the next slide. But he was really, really good at decision making. However, he wasn't a people person. Excuse me. How many times have we heard the phrase that X or Y is not a people person? And if they're not a people person, the high likelihood is they're going to score low in some places on the emotional intelligence assessment tool. Absolutely going to happen. So the other thing about Duncan was he was good at decision making. He got things done. He was fast. He was pace setting. And what he was really good at is he could tolerate stress. Yeah, just bring it on. Give me some more stuff. I don't care if 2 people have left. I don't care if people are going sick. I just want to get this job done. I just want to get the money in for the company so that we're high performing again. So he didn't do people, but he could do stress. He was really good at being able to take a lot on. He was very resilient. So, okay then. So this you might have a few Duncans in mind now, or I don't know what the female for Duncanesses maybe in mind. And then Duncan didn't enable or encourage anybody. He never checked in with anybody. Coming in the morning, he would be straight to his desk, straight on the laptop, straight to work. No cup of tea, no, how is everybody? How was your evening? All those kind of nice emotional intelligence things that we do when we engage with our team. So he didn't enable anybody. He was not concerned with anybody's self-development. He wasn't bothered about where they'd be going in the organization, because he was so driven, perhaps by the money, by the big bonus, but he was so driven to achieve what he was brought in to achieve. So you're beginning to think a little bit now, this guy Duncan, in working for him, guess what? There was absolutely no joy, and evidenced by the fact that people were going sick, and evidenced by the fact that he lost 2 people who actually resigned. So yeah, people resigning because of their boss. We've probably all come across it in our respective industries that we're in. I've come across it in my policing world, but to have to go to the strength of resigning because you just can't get on with the boss, there's something seriously wrong. Luckily, the organization spotted this. I'll just go through some of the scores. So what they did was they said, hang on, we need to do something about Duncan here. So what do we need to do about it? Well, we need to get an emotional intelligence assessment tool in, not one of the free online ones that you can do in about 10 seconds. We need to do a proper one that's scientifically proven. So they brought in the guy who found it, funny enough, who actually taught me. So what they did was, did this assessment on, I'll talk about the scores, but what if you were working for Duncan? How would you feel if you were working for Duncan right now? That'd be interesting to put that in chat as well. If you're able to put that in chat, that would be good. I mean, how would you actually feel? Bear in mind, I was mentioning that his decision-making scores were high, his stress tolerance was high, and his problem solving were high. In the UK and Ireland, when we do this assessment, the average for us is 100, just to give you an idea. It's different on different continents. So they've done this assessment. That's why it's scientifically proven. Each continent has a slightly different average score. But for the UK and Ireland, it's 100. So where he scored high, Duncan, he had 117 for stress tolerance, and he also had 113 for problem solving. So he was above average for problem solving and above average for stress tolerance. And his lowest scores, this is going to be interesting here, his reality testing, bear in mind we should be around about 100, his was 33. So he's 67 adrift of the average UK or Ireland person. His second lowest score was empathy. He scored 41. He's 60 adrift of the average person in the UK or Ireland. So guess what? There's a lot of work to be done as a coach with Duncan, and I'll give him his due. He did it. He actually did do lots of work with as I say, the guy that taught me. Again, what would it feel like to be working for him right now? What would it be like just then? What would it be like working for him? Good news is, he did do, it was 4 sessions of coaching. And what the coach would be looking for is, we need to get Duncan's scores balanced. So when you, for instance, line stress tolerance of 117 against his reality testing of 33, you've got something like an 80 score difference. Everybody's score, no matter which way you compare different of the subsets, should be less than 10. That way we know that we are balanced. So a lot of coaching went on to try and bring Duncan's various 15 subsets together. As I say, if I had another hour, I'd be able to talk you through each particular one, but I'm just giving you some kind of snapshots of the things that went on in terms of coaching Duncan. So what he was trained to do was focus on the imbalances and then what that actually meant. So in particular, empathy. He was trained to bring his empathy up, his understanding of what empathy was, how to engage with other people, how to engage with staff. And he was really taken through some action plans. So he actually set himself an action plan each 3 months of his coaching sessions. So he had coaching sessions every 3 months, and he had an action plan to take forward, and his scores did improve. They improved drastically. Some of them went above 100, but even after the year, his empathy score went up to about 78. Huge improvement on 41, but still below the average UK and Ireland. And that's the whole thing about this scientifically proven assessment tool, is it's based upon thousands and thousands of people who have taken the assessment. Hence, we know what the average is for UK and Ireland of being 100. So lots and lots of imbalances on Duncan's wheel, lots and lots of coaching, and he did improve. And luckily, they kept him in the organisation, and recognised the frailties of him and his team, and why these people were going sick and why they were leaving the organisation. So they did turn it around, but it needed somebody in HR to recognise that we needed to do an emotional intelligence assessment and then follow-up coaching for Duncan. So as
Rob,
I say,
Rob, can I ask you a question on this? It's
yeah,
just come
sure.
to me and I don't know the answer to it. And I'm sure other people are thinking it too. Is it better, if you're taking one of these tests, is it better that, say, for example, all your scores were around about 70 or 80, but they're all within 10 of each other, rather than having some that maybe are like 120 and others that are like 30? Is it better to be lower and balanced than high, really high on some and really low on others?
Yeah, definitely, because you've got a huge impact. That's why I was saying it's not about having a high EQ, it's about having a balanced EQ. If you know you're balanced, there's probably still some awareness stuff going on here about, for instance, what if we were 80 across the board, very, very balanced, but there's areas for development.
Okay.
So we're trying to get everybody to the average. So for instance, if I had an empathy of 80, how do I get from 80 to 100? And how do I bring the rest up with me in terms of doing that? And the only way you can check this is you would do another test like a year on or 6 months on. So Duncan took 3 different tests, and you could see through coaching, he was coming up and things were getting in balance as well. Because sometimes you're overdoing things. So for instance, if your decision making is 130, have a think about, hang on, you're great at making decisions, but you're not thinking about the repercussions of making those decisions. So sometimes it might be, let other people make the decisions.
Right.
You know, do it collaboratively. You don't have to do it on your own. So you bring your decision-making score down to meet the others. So it's not just about bringing stuff up. Some scores you can bring down the way as well.
It's very interesting listening to this, because I had a client in the, I'm just going to say the Middle East. I'm not going to say anything more than that.
Yeah.
And they employed a new person, and it was not Duncan, but it could have been Duncan.
Yeah.
And they're a long-term client, and this has happened to them. He's come in and I'm sure brilliant at the job, but as a result, a lot of people have left, a lot of people have complained. They've ended up, they haven't done this because they wouldn't. They've ended up letting him go.
Right.
Having to start again, but they've lost so many good people in the process. They're in a right mess now because of it.
Yeah.
So
you're right, Tracy. It can cost the organisation.
Imbalance can really do quite a lot of damage.
Yeah, absolutely. If nothing's done about it. So as I say, it's not just about taking the assessment, it's about following it up with coaching. And that's the crucial piece. It's all very well, that's why I don't advocate free tests online, because nobody does anything about it afterwards. So just moving on, so the benefits of having an improved emotional intelligence. You've got to get these things in balance here between the heart and the brain kind of stuff. So a high and balanced level of emotional intelligence helps us to communicate better. It reduces our anxiety and our stress. It also helps us to diffuse conflicts, improves our working and social relationships, as advocated by Goleman, allows us to empathize with others because we understand what empathy is then, and it effectively helps us to overcome life's challenges, not just work challenges, life's challenges. Because when we do the test, we don't say to somebody, think of yourself in the workplace, then take the assessment. What we say to everybody is, think of your whole life, work and home, everything all together before you take this assessment. So everything's in there, so it's not just a work-related test or assessment. Got to use the right language. So our emotional intelligence affects the quality of our lives because it influences our behavior at work and allows us to improve our social. So it's not just a workplace thing. It can be home and it can be work. Just playing a little bit of catch up here. So concluding remarks then in terms of emotional intelligence and the assessment tool. Everybody is born with emotional intelligence. Every single one of us has a level of emotional intelligence. For me, it's knowing where your start point is really, really important, based on those 5 composites and the 15 sub-elements as well. Improving all of our emotional intelligence, I think it's very easy, but we just need to know how. It's through an action plan, it's through awareness, it's through coaching. COVID, and I'm an example of this, and I'll share my example quite candidly here, is having an impact on our EI. It's what we're doing about it that's important. And I'm happy to share. I did this this assessment again about a month ago. 2 years on, I've got a high EQ, and it moved up 1 point. I thought, that's good. I've gone up another point. And actually, some of the two of the things that dropped down, one was reality testing, and the other was empathy. They both dropped by about 8 points and caused some new imbalances. And I'm thinking, why has that happened then? And I'm pretty confident I know why. For 6 months, I've been in this hut where I am now. I've not seen anybody. I don't go out anywhere. I don't meet clients. I don't do training outside anymore because nobody wants it outside for now. So everything I'm doing is online through this camera. Yes, I see my wife. I go dog walking. But in the main, I'm not socially interacting with anybody. So guess what? I don't have to empathize with anybody, or apart from my wife and the dogs. So I think it's dropped because of that. And I think my reality testing is the only reality I'm going to on a daily basis is in the hut and some walking. So for me, we have to be mindful these things can move depending on our circumstances. So I do believe COVID is impacting on everybody's emotional intelligence. And I'm a live proof of that from my score that I got, my assessment score I did about a month ago. So EQ-I2 is a scientifically proven, so don't forget this, it's scientifically proven assessment tool. It's used globally. As I say, the average in the UK is 100. It's different in Middle East, it's different in America, and it's different in Africa, as an example. Knowing your score isn't enough. It's all about balancing your score across the 5 composites and the 15 subscales. That's the crucial bit for me. That's just the sign of somebody who's going to be coaching you. They've got to be certified. So don't just let anybody coach you. Make sure that they're certified with this. You need to know this model in order to be coached by somebody. So you can't just do the test, then go to any coach and be coached. It's not quite the same. The two things go together for obvious reasons. I hope it's obvious reasons. So to you, Tracy, I think before, I know we've got some questions and answers at the end.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very, very much, Rob, for going through just a very whistle-stop tour of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, as I said at the start of this webinar, is a very hot topic right now. Whether it's because of COVID, I don't know, but it has become more popular than ever. We include it in some aspects. I was talking to Rob last week about this. We pretty much include it in most of our courses. We don't do the assessment, but we include an element of emotional intelligence in all of our courses. We always do a little session somewhere, if it's a manager's course or a sales course, because we believe it impacts on everything. We actually sat down last week and we said, is there a course that we don't include it on? And I said, I'm sure we don't include it on our finance courses or on our Six Sigma courses. And then we went through them and we said, oh, that's a bit of emotional intelligence. So we really do include it on everything that we do. So it's something that we're quite big on in terms of how we like to deliver our training. But we wanted to introduce you to the particular profiling report, as Rob said, the only scientific one available, because this is something that we can do. We can do it as an organization. So we can come into your organization and we can profile a whole team, for example, and then we can do some workshops afterwards whereby we explain what they all mean and how they can move forward. So we can do it as a group, or we can do it individually, whereby a person comes to us and we do an individual profile, and then they have individual actual coaching sessions over whatever period they agree. It's a really, really valuable thing to have. It's a really, really valuable thing to have a look at yourself and see how you are as an individual and how you are perceived and how you interact with others as well. So as I've said, we can do this in terms of a larger group and then do the webinars afterwards to explain things, or group coaching afterwards to explain things, or we can do the individual, which is always the preference because you obviously get a lot more from it doing it individually. So all I would like to say on top of that is we've stopped doing 2 webinars a month because we're really busy now, thank goodness. But we're still going to continue to do 1 free webinar a month because we think it's important. People seem to like them. So on the bottom of this slide that you've got up there now, you can see a QR code. If you hold your camera up to the QR code and put it in front of it, that will take you to my LinkedIn page. If you're not already connected to me on LinkedIn, please connect to me and just put free EI webinar on there so I know where you're connecting to me from, because I don't connect to everybody. And the reason I'm asking you to connect to me on LinkedIn is because we advertise our free webinars predominantly on LinkedIn. So if you would like to know what the next ones are and get involved in those, that's where we'll be advertising them. We also offer bespoke in-house workshops and webinars. We're still doing mainly online at the moment, but we are starting to go back to face-to-face. We've got some courses booked in for October. So if you've got any sort of interest in EI internally or any other subject, we are still here and very busy at the moment. If you look on our website, I've put both of our websites on there, the Middle Eastern one and the UK one. There's loads of free material on there. There's some free training manuals, some free fact sheets, lots of blogs. So go and have a look on there as well. We put lots of things free on our website as well. So we're all about giving back, and I hope that you found this useful. I'm going to send you a copy of this slide. I have recorded it. I think I missed the first 2 minutes, I'm sorry, but I've recorded it. So I'm going to send you a link to that, and I'm also going to send you some extra information. So we thank you so much for sticking with us. We had 55 at one point. We've still got 45, which is really great for a webinar. We're going to open it up now to questions. So Rob, if you go to our questions slide, and we're going to look in the chat box, and you can also unmute. So, oh gosh, I've got a lot.
Trace, I've just seen George has asked a question about
Okay.
how do you assess people using this tool? Is it based on a questionnaire, or do you interview them face to face? Good question, George. I never mentioned it actually. It's a 133 questions, and once those 133 questions are answered, that gets compiled scientifically with all the stuff that goes on in the background, and then it's around about 18-page report comes out. We don't ever give the report to the client until literally 5 minutes before the coaching session. The reason we do that is we don't want the client to misinterpret what they're reading. They, for instance, might see a score of 45 on something and think, oh my goodness me, I'm not very good at self, whatever it is. And then you think, no, don't worry about it. So we don't give that report until 5 minutes before the coaching session. Then at the coaching session, I would ask, what bit of that do you want me to go through first? And whatever you think, and usually people go for low scores first, they want to know what that means. And then I just refer that back to them and say, what do you think it means? And just give me, and then you take them through the coaching session using the scores. But I always leave the client to lead, to start with, what is it about the report they want to talk about? But really good question, George. Sorry, I didn't mention the 133 questions.
Does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to ask us? I do believe as well, Rob, I might be making this up, but I do believe it's available in various languages too, is it, the report?
Yeah, it can be any language, yeah.
The profile.
Obviously, I can't do any language, but the report
No, Rob
be.
has to get the answers in English, but you can actually get the questions in any language. Yes, you can.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it's not all about this report as well. This webinar was not to flog this report. It was to give you an overview of EQ. So, you know, if any of you think, well, actually, I'm quite interested in EQ within our organization, but we don't want to do the report, that's absolutely fine. Rob can still run sessions based around the wheel and based around what a balanced EQ is without having the report. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of thanks.
Yeah, it's been great interaction as well with the audience, which is
very good.
A lot better.
What's the best certification for becoming an EQ practitioner? This is the only certification for becoming an EQ practitioner. Yeah. There is no others.
If anybody wants to be a practitioner, Tracy, I don't do that, but I can certainly link them to.
But we have the contact of someone who can. Yes.
So
if
anybody
you
want
to be a practitioner, we can let you know. Yeah. But you know, this is the only official qualification and the only official profile that you can take in regards to EQ. Any other questions? We've still got 36 people on, which is fantastic.
That's good.
Questions in the chat box. You can unmute and ask. If not, feel free to log off and we'll send you some more information through. We've got lots of thanks, which is lovely. We're going to stay on a few minutes more to see if there's any more questions. Is it from Travis Bradbury? I don't know who Travis Bradbury is, Rob. It's not Travis Bradbury who
Who
qualifies
might
people?
no, a guy called Scott Watson is
Scott
the guy.
Watson. It's not Travis Bradley, no.
Never heard of Travis Bradley, actually.
Oh, he wrote the book apparently. He wrote the book apparently, EQ 2.0.
All right, okay. Well, the guy who I've got is a guy called Stephen Stein.
Stephen Stein. So I suspect, like most things, there's a couple of people who've written books about it.
Everybody's written a book.
It's like things, isn't it? I think initially it was Daniel Goleman who founded it.
This is a really good book if anybody wants to get this book, The EQ Edge.
The EQ Edge.
Yeah, that's the best. Can you see that, Tracy?
Yeah, I can put it a bit nearer the camera. Now I can see it, the EQ Edge. I'll send them that out on the email as a link.
Okay.
I'll send them that out on the email link. We've still got 26 people on. Any other questions?
Yeah.
No, we're logging off now. We're losing people now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we don't seem to have any other questions. So I'm going to end the session right now. I'm going to say thank you, Rob, as always.
Thanks,
fantastic job. Thank you to everybody who stuck with us throughout the whole thing. That is lovely. Thank you very much. And we'll see you all again on the next one.
Yeah, thanks very much. See you in the next one.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.